It's really common to hardwire accessories into your vehicle, like I did with this overlander just a couple of videos back. But it's also really common to use the fuse tab to do that. And what that does is tap into your OEM fuse panel, steals some of the output from that, and then uses it for the accessory. This is really not ideal because it's gonna put an additional strain on your fuse panel, and it's gonna draw from the fuse panel outputs that it was not intended to do. To address this, I'm gonna be installing an auxiliary fuse panel from Painless Performance. While this video may seem sponsored because I really like this company, it's not. I paid for all of these things that you're gonna see in this video myself off of Summit Racing. They did feature me once in JP Magazine in a Painless Performance ad, which I thought was pretty cool, but it's still not sponsored. The good news is we have all of the information we're gonna need in this book. Given the amperages needed, the resistance in the wire, fuses needed, relays needed. I am obviously kidding. I went to school to study engineering, so the good people over at Painless and do all of this work and the calculations for me. Looking back, it is so nice that I do not have to do things like this anymore. Painless has a couple of different options for auxiliary fuse panels. This kit comes with two 70 amp relays that provide power to the fuse panel, giving 7 different options for fused outputs. It has your zip ties, it has different terminals for the battery, all of the fuses, connections, and a fuse tap so that it only is powered when the vehicle is on, so you're not worried about draining your battery. I did purchase some other things that I'll show during the install. I also have their trail rocker that I'll be installing in a later video. The first thing to get out of the way is figuring out where you're gonna mount the fuse panel. And I wanna keep it close to my OEM fuse panel, which is right down under there. And this area is just pretty accessible in general, so I'm gonna put it behind these bars using a piece of sheet metal that I'm gonna fab up after this. But I also wanted to be able to hold the aftermarket remote start kit. These things were held on with just zip ties that I cut off that you can see on the floor. It's not the prettiest thing, but it's not supposed to be. I made this in hopes to improve it a little bit later. This thing was pretty badass, being able to just cut metal with these shears made it super quick. Take your shears, stick it in between, pull the trigger, and you're done. So this bracket uses a factory hole. You can kind of see the bolt moving at the top. And I also have factory holes on the bottom on either side. So I didn't have to do any drilling for this. Bit of an update. The original bracket that I had designed was a little bit too short and there was too much wasted space to the left. And with the new iteration, you can see I have enough room to mount the previous owner's remote start kit, which came with 2 computer receivers. I'm not sure what everything is. I'm gonna go ahead and drill all the holes for the grommets and all the holes for where everything is gonna be mounted to. I'm gonna throw some paint on it and check it out. We have another Grand Cherokee in the driveway. This is a brand new WK2 my mom purchased, the last of the WK2s before the WLs come out. I'd still consider this a bit of a prototype. I wanna make it out of ABS like I was saying before, but because I didn't, I used the hole saws to make different sized holes for all the grommets. And then there's one down here as well, just to avoid any abrasion from the steel getting through the insulation of the wire and then causing it to short. The kit comes with spacers to push the fuse panel up, and you'll see I kind of need those because I can't push down on the wires, so the spacers fit in between on either side like that. The next thing I'm going to install is this distribution block. And what this will do is it'll take one larger gauge cable off this post, go to the body of the Jeep, and provide a common ground for all of the accessories that I have running off this fuse panel. Now that we have a location for the ground, I'm going to turn it over. I had originally planned to mount these 2 relays like that, but obviously that would come in contact with the wires. I put some dielectric grease on this just to lube it up. I guess it would help with moisture if needed, but I'm not expecting much moisture there. Now I'm going to take the ground that grounds both of the relays, put it through that grommet, and we'll bolt it in right there. Next up, to keep it clean, we're going to take this distribution panel and we're going to take the outputs from the fuse block. They're going to be run from behind it and up and out through this grommet. And then the 7 outputs are going to be attached to these 7 posts. Lastly, I just need to address the remote start kit. I'm gonna bolt that there, and this piece is gonna be double-sided taped to the back of the panel so it doesn't get in the way of the output wires. And this wire is labeled to ignition, which is one of the cool things that Painless does. They label every single wire so that you know which wire goes to what. And what this wire is going to allow me to do is wire it to a source on the vehicle that already only turns on when the ignition is hot. And we'll just pull that through. Each wire is labeled accessory number 1 through number 7. And it's a good idea to keep those in order because just like these are wired, the fuse panel is actually in order. So this is accessory number 1, number 2, number 3. So you know that the accessory that you're attaching to the top is going to be fused to this one. And if you have a blown fuse or an accessory is not working, you know exactly which fuse to check and which wire to check as well. Definitely a good idea to save the wire that you cut off. There's a lot of it. Wire is typically pretty expensive, and this is good quality wire you can use for a different project. There it is, a last look at it before we install it into the Jeep. All 7 outputs from the fuse panel are on the distribution block, and I just added this like 0 gauge wire that's going to go to this distribution block so that it can provide a solid ground for all of the accessories that I have attached to it. I've got a hard time believing I'm going to get any usable footage out of these next few minutes. There it is. She's in. So I have this loom, which is the remote start kit loom. So I'm going to try and run it underneath and then behind the fuse panel that I just added. Scratch that, the wires were not long enough to go all the way around the back and then plug it on the left side. So I flip this box around and I'm just gonna plug it in on this side. All right, bottom one is in too. The last thing we need to do for the remote start kit is to just run this to ground. So I'll put this behind the entire panel and then I'll put it on one of the posts on the distribution block. The Painless kit gives us 2 different methods to find an ignition hot source. The first is this on the left, which would splice into an actual wire that's ignition hot. Or we can use this fuse tap, which is going to go into the OEM fuse box and find an ignition only fuse. My fuse panel is only 6 inches behind this auxiliary one, so I'm gonna go with option 2. In the manual, it shows this is ignition only. So I'm gonna put the fuse in there with the fuse tab installed on it. I went ahead and cut the ignition only wire and we could plug it into the fuse tap. And now it should only turn on when the ignition is on. And for that main power cable, we'll step on over to the engine bay and you'll see that we're gonna route that right through to that grommet. Now, because I am putting that wire into the engine bay, I'm gonna be using this wiring loom from Painless, which is just gonna keep it protected and it's gonna look a lot better when it's installed. All right, we're just about done here and we can go ahead and test this out. I'm gonna use the Overlander, which has this magnetic base and these pins that charge the unit when it's placed onto the mount. This is the hard wiring kit that I wired up using a fuse tap in a previous video. So it's got the ground ring terminal that we're gonna keep. We're just gonna put a ring terminal on this end, fuse it, and make sure everything works. Get the positive end through. The negative ring terminal is going to be pretty tough to see me do, but it's just going to come out through that grommet right up here, and it's going to come in and screw on just like the remote start kit and the relays that I did when I had it out of the vehicle. A lot of hard work went into that. Now we can just turn the key. The Overlander should turn on, which it did. It's charging, key off, not charging. Forgot to show this, but with everything put back on, closes right back up. Wouldn't even know it's there. All right, guys, that about wraps up everything for this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed watching it. If I can go back and change anything, it would be to order the ABS plastic as soon as I even thought about making a fuse panel, because I kept pushing it off and I ended up using metal, and I really wish that I had the ABS plastic. Either way, the kit turned out really nicely. Everything looks really good. It functions even better than it looks, and I'll be able to power up all the accessories that I need to in the future. So if you guys want to see me install the other accessories, just click on the link up top. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching, and let me know if you have any questions in the comments below.